I really should clarify a few things at this point. The first of which being that, while it is true, I may not have immediately read the entire employee handbook before the incidents of my last post. I had read most of it. Chapter headings, section descriptions, general overview, etc. Even if I'd read the entire part about hitchhikers, it wouldn't have prevented the whole incident. With not Myra and plus, I'll remind you that I'm not actually dead yet, so I'm not entirely helpless. The main issue with the employee handbook is that it's vague. Sure, there are rules and guidelines, but I get the impression Rantor and the rest of the dispatchers don't entirely know what's going on either. This Route 333 makes its own rules. It doesn't always care to inform us about them. Okay, and second thing, I have actually gone to therapy before. I prefer not to get into it much with a bunch of anonymous online Redditors. No offense, but it wasn't especially helpful. For some people I know, therapy makes things harder first, before it makes them better. But for me, it sort of just made things harder. And harder and harder. Something about the vulnerability of it. I've tried a few medications too, but I've heard some people are pretty resistant to them. I suspect that's me even so. Thank you for all your concerns. For real. Now on to something more related to Route 333, and the many ways I repeatedly almost get myself killed. Because, let's be real, that's why you're here. Not to hear about my ever-degrading mental state. Mainly, I realize I haven't said much about the other truckers. I'm sure to nobody's surprise, I mainly avoided the other drivers. The first few weeks at my job, every few hours I'd pass one of them on Route 333 and give a small wave, but apart from that, I was in no rush to make new friends. Especially not ones in their 40s and 52nds. If it weren't for the faceless man, I might have never gotten to know them at all. There's not much of a section in the employee handbook on the faceless man. The only mention is when it says, the faceless man has learned how to unlock doors from the inside. Ominous too though, so I made sure to close my windows and lock the doors every night before laying down on the cab sleeper. Generally, I'd leave the windows shut even if it was sweltering, but one night it got especially sweltering. There weren't many clouds in the sky. I'd already tossed and turned in my sweaty sheets for an hour before I decided to let in some air. Just a crack. I even wiggled my fingers in the open space to make sure that's all that could get through. When I tried to sleep this time, there was enough of a breeze to let me. The next time I woke, it was still night. The moon was covered by clouds, but enough light made it through to illuminate the interior of the cab. Clouds. I sat up. There was no reason to be afraid. I knew the doors were locked and secured. Even so, I glanced first at the drivers. I hadn't broken any rules. The doors were locked and secured. Even so, I glanced first at the driver's side window, and then the passenger. My entire existence jerked to a stop. It stared at me through the glass. At least that's what I assumed it was doing. The thing had no eyes, no ears, no hair, and no mouth. The only feature reminiscent of a living creature's were two snake-like slits in the middle of the face. A nose of some sort had faced me. It smelled. I could audibly hear the inhale even through the door, and the slits widened to holes the size of chestnuts. Light from the track stop caught on each individual hair, almost like teeth. Hello. I tried, but no sound came out. I forced my throat to clear and tried again. Do you need something, are you? Are you the faceless man? Right, because of course, the thing with no ears or mouth is going to hear you and respond. And then I thought, maybe the name Faceless Man is somehow offensive, so I immediately asked, unless you prefer to be called something different. Because apparently I'd literally already forgotten this. Thing could not hear me, if you can't tell. I tend to overthink whilst in uncomfortable situations. By this point, I'd already experienced enough oddities of the road that I was content to just curl there in the corner and wait until the thing left. That's exactly what I would have done if the faceless man hadn't reached a hand with 7 fingers up and tapped the glass. Quick clarification. When I say fingers, that's probably precisely what you envision fingers. What I really mean is 7 bleach white protrusions. each a meter long with dozens of joints and gnarled nails curling from their tips. I watched in horror as each of the fingers felt along the glass, found the lip, then snaked inwards. Nope, I told it. That's not happening. You're not doing that. I scrambled for my pants. Then decided it really wasn't worth it and clambered for the driver's seat in my boxers. The faceless man inhaled again and swiveled to follow my movement. Out, I commanded, and twisted the key. The truck roared to life. The ivory fingers felt around, sliding past the unlock button and heading directly for the inner handle. One last chance, I warned. Even though it was entirely clear by now, the thing wasn't able to hear me. When it predictably continued to not be able to hear me, I did what anybody would do in this situation. I rolled up the window. They flattened each cylindrical finger, compressed where the glass closed into them, and the thing outside shuddered in pain. It yanked at them, trying to escape, but unable. I gave it 2 more seconds, then cracked the window again. The faceless man yanked its fingers from my car, exhaled greenish globs of what I suspect was snot on my window, then skittered away. Needless to say, I got an early start that morning. While that whole incident did shake me up and made me demand a rig with internal AC, non-negotiable, it reminded me of something. The faceless man had tracked my movements. By smelling me, maybe that was just a coincidence. Probably smells were how it was drawn to any human. But there was already another subset of road dwellers who apparently knew my scent. Could the faceless man somehow be connected? The employee handbook said very little about the topic, and Randall hadn't seemed overly talkative when I'd asked him about the things in the forest. I approached a few SEAL workers instead. They explained that, no, the faceless man probably wasn't connected to the things in the forest. They were confined to the forest. He was confined to cloudy nights. He was just a harmless pest, basically, like a raccoon looking for somewhere to warm up, though he would occasionally suffocate people by shoving his fingers down their throat, so maybe not entirely harmless. They also told me not to trust any energy drink brands I didn't recognize at gas stations, and to avoid coffee at late-night diners. The coffee wasn't dangerous. It just was nasty. I started talking with the other drivers at the truck yard before and after hauls. We'd chat when we stopped for showers at the same time, and radio greetings when we passed each other on the road. Slowly, I got to know some of them. Deidre was a divorced mom of 3. She hated she had to be away from her kids for such long stretches, but this job's pay was the only way she'd be able to send her oldest to college. Then there was Vikram. He immigrated with his family from India about 10 years ago. He tried taxi ING in Chicago, but the pay was crap and the people were rude. He liked long hauling much better. Chris was more of a short hauler. He'd been on Route 333 for almost 15 years, longer than anybody else. He'd started like me, with an extremely short drive time, and the road had taken its sweet time expanding. For him, he mainly did short trips now to be safe, 1 or 2 day hauls. That's how long it took him to get out of the Redwood section to the first turnaround point from my interview. About 10x slower than me still. Even so, he could still cover ground quicker than some of the others. I'll be done in a year or 2. He confided in me once over breakfast at a diner. They pay me more than anybody, but takes me longer to get anything done besides. Don't want to risk getting lane locked. That's what we call it. Lane locked star. Asterisk. Usually Route 333 expands at an even pace, but eventually, without warning, it will one day explode in length. What took hours to drive the previous day might take weeks or even years. Now there's signs to watch out for. Less stars in the sky than usual. Rest stop attendants getting colder to you. Expansion at an increasing pace. But it's impossible to predict the exact moment lane locking happens. There's always a risk of getting taken unawares. It's like a fever breaking. Deidre explained to me we're the virus. It takes a minute for the highway to get immune to us, but once it does, it happens all at once. There's a small stretch far out into the desert, where it's common to see a neon orange flatbed heading the direction of the real world. Sometimes it's missing. It slips into pockets of the road the rest of us Luckily haven't accessed yet, but always eventually you see the flat bit again. Same area. Still driving. How long has he been going now? I asked Chris one morning. 6, maybe 7 years. Ailes a good guy. We'll pull over and talk occasionally. His time came quicker than most. How much ground has I covered? Chris exhaled through his mouth and shook his head. To you, a few miles. Maybe he'll never make it back. Not in 100 years. He has a family, though. He refuses to quit. Some do, though. Some accept they're stuck, that it's not worth years of their life, trying to get out and find a new sort of life. On Route 333, people like Tiff. The first time I met Tiff, I was getting coffee at 3 in the morning at the Wayside Diner. It's true. The coffee at late-night diners on Route 333 is truly, utterly disgusting, but I was desperate for any sort of caffeine, however crappy. I was only a few hours from the truckyard terminal, and if possible I try not to sleep on the highway, more than absolutely necessary. Call me high maintenance, but I'm still not a fan of waking up to see Mr. Nose sniffing longingly at me. A middle-aged waitress delivered my coffee and waited there as I sipped it. I looked up at her. This is actually palatable. Not exactly a compliment, but I'll take it. The woman slid in the booth across from me. You must be the new one. Brendan Wright. Yeah. I wasn't used to people on Route 333 knowing who I was, or really even acknowledging it. It was still unclear from the handbook and my interactions with them if they were actual people or just sort of there. This woman seemed different, though. I'm Tiff. Former employee turned waitress. I've heard of you, the others. They mentioned you still remember me. Do they? Glad to hear I'm not entirely forgotten. Almost never visit me anymore. You work here? She shrugged. When I want, staffing lets me fill. And not so sure if they're letting me, as much as I tell them I work here and they believe me. Doesn't pay anything, but it's not like I need money anymore. Just like chatting. I much prefer real people, though. She clasped her hands, and muscles flexed along her fully tattooed arms. Tiff was exactly the type of tough woman you'd imagine would become a trucker. Well, that mixed with a sort of desperate, lonely friendliness only found at an old folks' home. Tell me, she said. What was your first reaction when you realized Route 333 wasn't a normal road? I always asked that. I don't think I've ever screamed at an interviewer before. She laughed, and after you started working. It was a bit weird, I guess. I don't know, I just sort of accepted it. A bit weird. She eyed me, then reached for my cup and took a swig. You seem like somebody going through something. True enough, we talked for hours that night. She grabbed us some pie from the counter, and she asked about my life and talked about hers. She'd been offered a position on Route 333 for years before she actually accepted. She'd heard the rumors. She knew the sort of dangers it offered. When she finally took a position, it was only because her daughter got a brain tumor. Treatment was expensive. Her daughter didn't survive. But after that, Tiff kept hauling to stave off the loneliness. I told her I understood. She told me that no, I didn't actually, seeing how I was a 20-odd-something puppy boy. But that I probably had my own similar thing. I did understand. That was close enough so she wasn't offended. By the time we called it quits, the sun was already rising. I don't remember everything we talked about, but I do remember myself standing up, patting her shoulder and saying, I'll talk to Randall. We'll find some way for you to get out of here. Her face went dark. You shouldn't have said that. Not where the road can hear you. I slept a few hours, then got up around noon. Before I left, I decided to take a shower. The water in the personal shower room was cold. I waited a few minutes for it to heat up, but when it didn't, I decided that realistically, there were people dying from parasites in other countries, and a cold shower likely wouldn't result in a grueling end. It did still suck, though. I finished the thing in a minute flat, then twisted the faucet to off. The water didn't stop. I tried twisting it the other way. The water only got stronger and the drain in the floor. It had stopped working. Freezing water was building up in a puddle. Soon, it overflowed the lip of the shower and onto the tile. I side-dressed and went for the door. My shower sandals slapped all the way there. It was locked. I flipped the lock back and forth, but anyway, I attempted. The door wouldn't budge. I pounded at it until the cold touch of water licked my ankles. It was around then I realized I was in trouble. "Hey," I screamed repeatedly. But nobody seemed to hear me. The water was at my knees now. How is it coming so fast? I waded back to the shower, tried the handle again, then did my first truly stupid thing of this incident. You all know by now I'm bound to do something stupid. Eventually, I bound my towel around the shower head to stop the flow, which didn't work a bit. Then I proceeded to slip, trip, and yank the towel with me. The shower head took off, the rate of water doubled. It was at my shoulders now. The water started pumping out, brown and sludgy. It was too murky to see through, and my feet things began to brush against them. Just my clothes, I told myself. But since when did my clothes have scales? I pounded at the door. I stood on the handle to keep my face above the water. There had to be some way out. I couldn't die like this. There was only a foot of breathable air now. Then 6 inches. Then one. I gasped a final breath as the slimy, scaled things wrapped around my ankles and jerked me down. I flailed to escape. But where would I go? There was no more air. The entire room was full of glacier water. My vision started dimming. I felt my throat convulsing, begging me to breathe. I couldn't resist anymore. The door flew open. Hundreds of gallons of water splashed out of the bathing room. Into the hallway. It slammed me against the wall, but I gasped and struggled to my feet. When I stood, the hallway was dry. The shower room was dry. My dirty clothes were in a heap on the bench, where I'd left them totally. You guessed it, dry. The only thing that was sopping wet was me. Tiff walked into the hallway a few seconds later, with a garbage bag. She glanced from me and my sobbing, close to the open door of the shower room. Then back to me. I told you. You shouldn't have said that. What just happened? I demanded, followed by a fountain of colorful words. A threat. The road doesn't like to give up things it's claimed for its own. Don't try to help me escape, Brandon. With that, she shook her head, stepped over the puddle at my feet, and carried the trash down the hallway. It took me some time to change my clothes, dry off, and even more time to calm down. Once I was finally able to think. The way Tiff had told me not to help her had been calm, resigned. She'd given up years ago. She'd accepted this track stop, and its miniature diner was her life now, because the only alternative was something worse. The road had claimed her. It wanted her to stay. And it would hurt anyone who tried to take her, except it couldn't hurt me. That realization, that shining understanding, more golden than any moment of happiness, filled me with hope. Route 3 o'clock. 33 couldn't hurt me because I had nothing I cared about. It could kill me, but so what? Why should that bother me? My life didn't matter to me, which meant I could defy the road all I wanted. Tiff might have given up, but I hadn't. I was going to get her out or die trying. I'd finally found something I hadn't had in years.